the interesting things we had to do is evaluate whether or not a prospective person looking at a software demonstration, if they looked at 3 in a row, could they distinguish one piece of software from the other 1 hour later? That was the question, right? And what we concluded is that they can't. Actually, we went about equipping our own operations with a device, an electronic voting device, so that they had to vote in real time on the software before they looked at the second piece of software. Because over time we realized that people looking at software solutions actually combine functions from all 3 applications they looked at. I looked at a demo from a Sage and a demo from Microsoft and a demo from, for example, SAP V1 or something like that. I looked at those 3 demos. That afterwards, the perception on behalf of the buyer was that they combined functions from all 3, right, to create what I call the fantasy software. So I'm always concerned. Like I think you have to look at the software. I'm not saying you don't have to, but it's not the first thing you do. It's often like the last thing you do. Once you know these are our needs, this is the business goals we want to accomplish. What do you have for innovative ideas, and how will this work in practical terms? Then I see the demo valuable. But I see that we have the demo out of sequence. I think it ties back to what you're saying about that buying process they go through. The other thing is that I think when we look at the amount of time we put to this, the other thing I find interesting, we talk about the project risks earlier on from Standish. We're going to make an investment. It's going to be a reasonably sized investment for whatever size company you are. You're going to have to live with it for, like, say, 6 or 10 years, unless you really make a mistake. Then you have to live with that and have to rebuy it. But the amount of time that goes into making that decision, it's like we won't allocate executive time. We won't even dedicate a project manager internally to help with this or things like that. We don't actually put the resources in relative to the amount of effort or the amount of time you'll have using it. So the time, price, to me, price is the last issue, I think. And I don't mean to say this in a way that's cheeky. But let's look at what the solution can do, how much life we can get out of it, and what business impact it can have, and let's then compare that to the price. And then we can have an intelligent conversation. But eliminating solutions based on price without knowing the impact they'll have, I think, is a big mistake. And I think my last point I'll cover there is the high-level reference calls. It's kind of funny. Everybody asks for references. Nobody calls them, right? And in fact, the humor of this is if you ask for a reference, what do you think the chance is that the partner gave you a bad one? Very low. It's extremely low. But no one's going to give you a bad reference. And then if you do call the reference, and I would say that there's a document attached to this seminar called How to Select a Solution Provider. And it gives a fairly good framework for the number of questions to ask. But if you're going to do a reference call at all, if you're going to bother to do one, do it well, right? But expect this, that the reference won't be a bad reference even. The fact that you got it means it's not going to be a bad reference. There are no bad references.
Yeah, I would, and just to build on that a little bit, George, I completely agree, is, when you're doing those reference calls, treat them very much like you would interviewing a candidate on the phone. What I know to be true about these types of projects is that they will run into some challenge somewhere along the way at some point in the implementation. Every single one does. It's how your solution provider handles those challenges that tells you how they're going to behave if you select them to implement your solution set as well. Right? So as soon as I hear, no, everything went well, it was a perfect implementation, there were no challenges, it was on time, on budget, then I'm suspect, significantly suspect of that reference.
Yeah, I would be too.
Yeah.
The other one is the what I call the rear view mirror perspective, which is we're gonna prepare an RFP, a request for punishment. And that's punishment both for the vendor and punishment for you, because let me explain that, because an RFP tends to quantify in functional terms only what you expect the software to do. And I can tell you there's probably 400 applications in the market today. Probably all 400 could look at your RFP and check 80% of the boxes. So what did you really win there? Right? And the prices will vary. I mean, one of the applications will sell for $99 instead of $400. One will sell for $4 million. The price disparity is huge, but the answers to the RFP are substantially. And I know that there's a notion in certain industries you have to have an RFP because you have to have 3 people tender, etc. But the punishment it vests on the customer is it eliminates any of the creativity, the innovation, the expertise that comes with implementing solutions every day. And I've looked at enough RFPs and then interviewed enough customers to know that your RFP captures the functional bit. It didn't capture any of your future. It didn't capture any of your structural changes you're going to anticipate, and it certainly didn't impact your business at all. The RFPs, although sometimes required, I don't think it's one of the better ways to select software. In fact, I think it's one of the worst ways. We need to know what we need, but we need to allow the people that really have their hands on these solutions every day to bring some value. That's what we're asking them to do. So let's allow them to do it. And for me, for the most part, RFPs eliminate that.
Yeah, I would agree, George. And again, don't mean to be disrespectful in any way, but RFPs are a little bit like letting the inmates run the asylum. So the reason that an organization typically is looking out to the business partner community for a new solution set is because they've run into challenges with their current solutions that they have today. So in a lot of cases, the solutions that they're mapping into the RFP are based on what doesn't work within their business. It's not fundamentally based on what is working in other businesses like theirs out there. So while I understand the logic around the RFP, much like I understand the logic around the demo, those two anchors of selecting a solution partner are the two actual anchors that fundamentally undermine landing on new creativity and new ideas and new solutions that you have not even contemplated internally.
I think it's Albert Einstein that said, you can't solve the problems of today with the same thinking that created them. That's the RFP, right?
Completely agree.
You get the same, the problem that was created in your organization is going to be documented in the RFP so you can carry that forward for the next 6 to 10 years.
Completely agree. Completely agree. Yeah.
So are you ready? And I guess the next part of it is, have you done your own homework? And when I say your own homework, I mean there is part of, knowing what the functionality is that you need. There's also the part that says, what are we impacting? So if you're going to make a decision on a solution provider, please know, what are you trying to impact here? Are we impacting inventory? Are we impacting cash flow? Are we impacting our collections? Are we impacting our utilization? Are we impacting our maintenance? I mean, there's got to be something we're impacting that has a dollars and cents bottom line to it. So if there isn't, then I'd say stop. Stop doing what you're doing and get to that. Because that will really clarify what the solution is and who you need to help you with it, right? Are your executives engaged? Because if we don't have an executive engaged, we really can't go anywhere, right? Why change in the first place is always a good question. That's one of my favorite questions to ask customers. I'm going to buy software. I always say, oh, good, if that was the answer, what question did you ask? Changing software is not an easy task. It's a requirement. I mean, it's things that we need to do because we need to stay current, right? But it's really around getting ourselves prepared and getting ourselves ready and making sure that we don't sabotage ourselves. Let's not set ourselves up in a situation or a process of selecting software and solution provider that ends up in a failed project.